Controlled demolitions can be engineered in many different ways. NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, claims they found no evidence for explosive demolition of the Twin Towers. Later, they admit that they never looked for it. Architects, engineers, scientists, and many others looked for it, and it was not hard to find. We make some predictions. We test those predictions and those assumptions with experiments. Objective, verifiable, repeatable experiments. We analyze the results and we draw conclusions.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that there really are some very fundamental questions to be raised about what happened on 7/7, and they range across a whole host of things. On a simple, basic level of an intelligence failure, which I guess would be the basic focus of an inquiry, which is why we failed to anticipate this attack. Surely, for a government that is interested in security, the first thing you'd want to do is to understand why we failed. And then you can introduce legislation, or then you can think about measures of improving our intelligence system and so on and so forth. To just rush through with this draconian anti-terrorist legislation really seems to me to be disingenuous. And looking at the evidence that has come out in the public record about the kind of advanced warning that was available, it does suggest that we did have a fairly precise indication of what was going to happen. And that does raise questions about why we did fail to act.
Now that we understand the history of the UK government's involvement in terrorism and their cooperation with leading radicals like Abu Hamza and Omar Bakri on British soil, it is conceivable that there was some prior knowledge about the 7/7 attacks within the intelligence and security services. The deceptive notion that they were clean skins was soon put to bed when it was revealed Khan and Tanweer had been surveilled as part of Operation Crevice throughout 2003 and 2004. The intelligence services had reportedly uncovered a large-scale Islamist plot with ties to Al-Mujaheroon to attack the Ministry of Sound nightclub in London, the Blue Water shopping centre, and other targets using fertilizer bombs. An official statement from MI5 claims that out of 55 people identified as worthy of follow-up investigations, Khan and Tanweer were put in the least urgent category and represented only 0.1% of all links on record in relation to the investigation. It's unsure how they pulled out that number, but it appears to be a gross underestimate. The alleged leader of the plot, Omar Khayyam, who is now serving life in prison along with 4 other accomplices, met with Khan and Tanweer 5 times in the weeks when he was engaged in the final planning stages of the plot. Authorities followed Khan and Tanweer along with the fertilizer plotters and were observed taking anti-surveillance precautions. Their car was tailed from the southeast to West Yorkshire, where Khan, who was driving, stopped in Beeston and then drove to his home in Dewsbury. Does this sound like only 0.1% of the investigation? MI5 says the men were unidentified at that time, but in March 2004, the ownership of the vehicle was checked and found to be registered to Khan's wife. 2 months later, MI5 checked again. This time it was registered as Khan's at a different address. BBC News cited a source that said they were so concerned about Khan they had planned to put him under a higher level of investigation. Not surprising, because several of Khan's conversations with Omar Khayyam were bugged. Transcripts show them talking about financial crimes and going overseas for terror training. There is even photo and video of Khan and Tanweer with the plotters. Instead of being open and honest, the intelligence agencies have done their best to dismiss their own evidence in order to play down the fact that they should have taken a closer look at Khan and Tanweer and then prevented the attacks if that's what they were found to be planning. A second report released in 2009 that went beyond the dubious official narrative aimed to get to the bottom of these intelligence deceptions, asking, could 7/7 have been prevented? It was all well and good admitting there were gaps in intelligence and that they were understaffed with a lack of resources, but this doesn't hold anyone accountable for those failures or put measures in place to prevent them in the future. The report was supposed to answer questions about Khan and Tanweer's links to the fertilizer bombers and how well known they actually were. But in the process, they ended up exposing yet another possible intelligence asset, leading rise to further questions about the government's relationship with terrorism themselves. Mohammed Q was believed to be a leading member of Al-Qaeda operating in Britain. He was tracked in 2003 and was seen repeatedly meeting with Omar Khayyam and several other accomplices to the fertilizer bomb plot. During the trial, Khayyam admitted to receiving funding from Q, and it was later revealed that Q was associated with none other than radical preachers Abu Hamza and Omar Bakri. It was also claimed during the trial that Q was the one who instructed Khan to travel to Pakistan for terror training. Despite all of this, he walked away a free man without any further questioning or surveillance by MI5, while 5 others went down for the plot. Media have since speculated that he was some kind of mole or intelligence asset.
Who was or is Q? There are a lot of people connected to this investigation. Some of them I know their identities, some of them I don't.
But you know who Q is?
I know who Q is, but I'm not going to discuss who he is or what he does during this interview.
Was Q not arrested possibly because he was working for you or MI5?
I'm not prepared to comment on any speculation like that.
Another interesting character was Junaid Babar, who was brought in to give evidence against the fertilizer bombers. Babar is a convicted terrorist and former member of Al-Mujahirun, who, following 9/11, openly flaunted to the media that he was leaving his home in the US to kill American soldiers in Afghanistan. Upon returning to the US, he became an informant and has given evidence at terrorism trials for the FBI and others ever since. During the fertilizer bomb trial, he confirmed that he'd met several of the accused during terror training in Pakistan. He himself had operated terrorist camps. Again, he was an associate of Abu Hamza and Omar Bakri, but most interestingly, he claimed under interrogation that he met both Omar Khayyam and Mohammed Sadiq Khan during terror training in 2003. Expert John Gilbert, who has interviewed Babar several times, claims it was actually Babar who ran the terror training camp that Khan attended. Despite being on an international terrorist watch list at the time, Babar was allowed to fly freely in and out of Britain, presumably under the dubious Covenant of Security. While here, he would meet Khan for the first time and would attend Abu Hamza's talks with some of the fertilizer bombers. It seems bizarre that this wanted terrorist would not be monitored during Operation Crevice, when 55 other people, most who didn't pose a threat at all, were all surveilled to some degree, including Khan and Tanweer. Instead, while arrests were being made, he was allowed to fly back to the US. But why would he return to a country where he was a wanted man? He was arrested immediately. One explanation given by the London Times is that he may have been an FBI agent before he was arrested. The BBC reported that inevitably there were suspicions that he'd been an FBI agent all along. This has some serious implications. Whether it's Bakri and Abu Hamza, the mystery mastermind Harun Aswat, Q, or Junaid Babar, the alleged 7/7 bombers seem to have been surrounded and influenced by a culture of intelligence assets rather than legitimate terrorists. Suspicions don't end there. Instead of being fully transparent about the various other claims of prior knowledge, the second report is adamant that there weren't any warnings specific enough to prevent the attacks. But then, citing national security, it doesn't go into detail about the warnings themselves, so nobody independent of the establishment can make their own mind up. This means we have to have blind faith in the very agencies that are supposedly being evaluated and have been exposed throughout this series. The Intelligence and Securities Committee is made up of parliamentarians appointed directly by the Prime Minister, so they're hardly an impartial third party outside of any government agenda. Because the report is not forthcoming about the specific warnings made, we will have to go on what was leaked to the media and partially acknowledged in the report. In a broad sense, it has become abundantly clear that there was an active element of extremism in Britain under the government's own policy of appeasement. This cannot be ignored. Furthermore, leaked documents show that over a year before the attacks, Tony Blair was given a dossier outlining a process by which extremist recruiters were targeting educated middle-class Muslim students with technical and professional qualifications to carry out sophisticated attacks in this country, breaking the agreement that they wouldn't plan attacks on British soil. Bakri's al-Mujahiroon is repeatedly mentioned to Blair, but barely mentioned in the 2009 report. Also, despite Blair's later denial, the dossier notes the catalyst that took the British-based radicals from verbal attacks and training with the likes of Hamza to real action was the illegal invasion of Iraq. Again, not even mentioned in the 2009 report. It doesn't take an intelligence official to realise that Britain's aggressive foreign policy and careless domestic policy had opened the country up to some form of blowback. Warnings became more concrete in September 2004 when Pakistani intelligence informed Britain that Abu Faraj al-Libi had sent coded messages to militants in the UK regarding plans for future attacks. They were ready to strike. But this again is not mentioned in the 2009 report. Then, in June 2005, French intelligence, who have been consistently critical of Britain's relationship with extremists, published a report to the French Interior Minister noting an imminent attack being planned within Britain. Whether they passed on this information or not, it's unlikely that France had more intel than Britain itself. So if France saw it as imminent, what was Britain doing? 2 months before the attacks, the terror threat level was lowered. Also in 2005, the US gave the UK a warning which should have given credence to all of the others. They reported that Abu Faraj al-Libi had been interrogated and confessed that there were plans for another Madrid-style attack in Europe, which, coupled with Pakistan's warning of attacks in Britain, should have at least got them prepared for an attack on the transit system. Some US officials actually named the London transit system as a likely target.